going on here. Okay, go.
Morning. How are we all? Oh my gosh,
Sorry,
Lori.
we're a little bit late. We've been having technology issues this morning, but I think we're here now. I think, Sadie, we're here. We got the slide up. It's been one of those where everything works this way, and then you wake up and it works that way. So hang in today. We don't know what may happen, but Sadie, take over.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, in our technology world, what are we sharing today for our what is it? Our first timers, because I know our frequent flyers know the script. But hello, welcome to this wonderful program provided to you by the SBDC. The SBDC, a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. We offer no-cost services to the local businesses through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, Go Biz. The Los Angeles Regional Small Business Development Center network serves small businesses throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. We offer no-cost business advising, meaning you can meet one-on-one via phone or Zoom to address your specific needs and challenges. And we also offer virtual training. This includes comprehensive workshops, this amazing program to help and adapt and grow your business. So on that note, Lori, hello, my love. How are you?
I am doing fantastic, and I love the intro. You take the information, and she have like this little step up excitement to her, so that's totally awesome. Okay, welcome back, frequent flyers. Welcome new to the show. I am going to try to share my screen, and we are going to see what happens. So we'll go with it on whatever happens right now. I'm going to do the little tiles too, Sadie. I'm not going to take a chance of my cursor disappearing like it did a minute ago. So hopefully you guys can see this okay. So with that, can you hear me okay, Sadie? I know somebody said I can't hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Okay. Tamara might want to up your volume. Hopefully that's just it. So oh good, you figured it out. Thank God. I thought you couldn't hear me and nobody else could hear me because I already told Sadie we may have a weird technology day going on. Okay. Should you be charging your customer sales tax? That is the webinar I have coming up, and that is what it is tomorrow. So this talks a lot about, especially if you're selling outside of California, many people think you don't have to charge sales tax if you sell outside of California, or you don't have to charge sales tax on labor. And that's partially true in California, but maybe not true in other states. So if you're confused about all that, check out my webinar tomorrow. My financial literacy series, always a big hit. I just had session 1, but you can easily jump in session 2 and session 3 because that's where I talk about how to manage your company with financials, which if it works, I'm going to do a little intro to one of my little models that I make all the time. Upcoming shows. Next week, we got Chris Marquez coming on. He's a sound engineer and musician. And he has his own company and he's been in a band, all this cool stuff. I'm going to learn about it as I interview him. But what I think is interesting, it's one of those follow your passion and the difficulty of following your passion, that starving artist concept. So we're going to find out a little bit more of the trials and tribulations when you try to turn something you love into a business and make money and be able to live, right? Versus what do they say in Hollywood? All the actors are really waiter and waitresses. So we're going to learn all about that. And then the next week, I got Clarissa Wilson coming on. My frequent flyers know Clarissa well. She is our expert on QuickBooks Zero and really accounting. And I'm asking her to come on. And usually there's more questions than we get time to answer. But I want to walk through, now that got through tax time, what is she seeing as common mistakes people are making in their file? So she's always a wealth of information on that. Okay, my words of wisdom, guys. Let's see if I can make this screen share well. Okay, I think I can. I think we're going. Okay, I'm going to run through something really quick, and I know you're going to be like, okay, Lori, I didn't get all the numbers, but I'm going to demonstrate something, and it's going to be really fun because this demonstration is a preview to our speaker today. It's going to tie in. So first of all, I want to talk about a SWOT analysis. Many of you may be familiar with a SWOT analysis. If you went through any business school or somebody talked to you about it, it's your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. if you ever had to do a SWOT analysis, especially in the bigger corporation, like maybe it was a homework assignment in school, you might know that one of the threats is changes in government's laws and regulations. It's kind of, if we're in the industry of this and the government does a new law, it may change our cost model, everything, and that could change the way we need to make business. So you kind of look at any new government regulation that's coming out or will come out as a potential threat and how you respond differently. Okay, so take the SWOT analysis, put this in the back of your head. Now, I always tell you, every single decision in your company is first and foremost a financial decision. I tell you that no matter what, whether it's marketing, whether it's hiring, whether it's going into a new business line, whatever, it's first and foremost a financial decision because you got to see how it weighs out. Because remember, guys, at the end of the day, net profit is what matters, okay? You cannot go to the grocery store, go to the cashier, go to buy your quart of milk and say, you should have seen my revenue numbers last month. The demand, people love me. They're going to go, give me a quarter to buy the quart of milk or whatever it is. So we have to know that the end goal is net income. Net income, if it's not substantial or it's not meeting your goals, it's not making you happy. It's not giving you the life you want. And then you might as well just go to the beach or get a job, right? So net income matters. So I'm going to demonstrate something really quick. So in my little model I created, and if you've been with me for a while, you've seen these models. All I'm saying, if I sell one unit at $16, it costs $6. This is my gross profit. These are the number of units I sell. Here is my current overhead. I'm just making up small numbers to explain something. And here is $25. So I want to make $25 a month. Well, I know I have to sell 15 units to make $25 a month, right? So I know that's true. Well, I want to hire somebody. I want to hire somebody because you got more demand. I'm working all the time. It makes logical sense. I need the help. So I want to hire somebody, right? So I say, okay, I'm going to hire somebody. That's going to be $75. Ooh, I can't buy a quart of milk with -50. So I can go back and I can say, well, how many units do I now have to sell? Well, I'm going to have to sell 23. 23, really? No. How am I going to get that jump in units? I have to add more marketing. So say I put more marketing in. Say I go from, 35, I added additional 30. So now I'm $65 a month in marketing. 23 units isn't going to do it. How many units do I now have to sell? Well, let's see. I did this in advance to go quick. 26 units brings me back to 30. So I've got to sell 26 units. So that means I got to sell 10 more units per month. And I might have to get a computer for the person. I may have more charges. So I stop for a second and I go, okay, so everybody in the audience, this is what CFOs do. They don't rush to this decision. I got to hire somebody. I got to do this. They go, what would happen if I didn't do that? Let's go back to 30. Let's not hire anybody. How much would I have to increase my selling price? What if I just increased it by $1? If I increased it by $1 and I went back to my 15 units, oh, that's above my benchmark. I would only have to sell about 14 units to be back at 34, maybe 13 units. So in this case, I might determine hiring is putting me way over to this huge jump I got to make to the other side. I'd be better off. You ready? Drum roll, guys. I'd be better off raising my prices. And if I lost a few customers, oh, lost customers, people get so afraid of that. If I lost the customers that didn't want to pay the dollar more, it wouldn't matter. I need less customers. So what we want to do is we want to question everything. We don't want to follow a pathway unless we know it's the right pathway to go. We want to take in every bit of consideration. So with that, I would like to introduce my guest for today, which many of you know. Xiomara Palma is the founder and CEO of Solvit HR. Is a certified human resources professional with over 15 years of HR experience across multiple industries. Xiomara specializes in helping small businesses remain in compliance with workplace regulations. And I always say, there's no such thing as a small business anymore. And you're like, Lori, you're talking to small businesses. What do you mean? And what I mean is when you're a small business, you might have POS systems, you're collecting payments, you're dealing with all these regulations, you got to get a business license, and you have to deal with HR laws too. So there's no such thing as a small business. They are all under the same domain. Now, some things you don't have to deal with until you get to a certain number of employees, but many things, it's the minute you start company, you deal with a lot of the same regulations. So with that, Xiomara, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here, Lori.
I love having you on. I tell you, I learn so much when you're on as well. It's amazing. It's just amazing. So first of all, Smart, for those that are not familiar with you, can you give us your background and rundown? Were you born out of the womb and said, my entire life I want to be an HR person? How did you get where you are today?
Pretty much, one of those people that I knew from the get-go, like I wanted to go into HR, graduating college. I wanted to pursue a career in HR. And, back in the day when it was like, now employers are just like delighted to see anybody apply for the job, to have a pool of applicants. But back in the day, it was just, people always wanted like all this experience before they hired you. So it was like a little challenging to get into HR for me. But once I did, I just knew like that was my calling. I love problem solving is my thing, hence the name of my firm, Solvit HR. So yeah, and when I landed a job as a consultant and just working with small businesses, I really, really found my calling because I felt, out of the bottom of my heart, I just felt like I saw so many small businesses being so vulnerable to not just HR or labor law, but just everything in that a business owner has to deal with. But in particular with human resources, because it's ever evolving. Just when people think that they are in compliance, a new set of rules rolls out, right? And if they are not on top of it, how are they supposed to know? How are they supposed to be in compliance? How are they supposed to keep up with all these regulations, right? So I really felt a calling and decided, I want to go out there and really be a lifeline to small businesses and help them out to be in compliance and navigate the world, the vast world of HR regulations. So fast forward, here I am, 17 years into it, and yeah, still loving it.
I have to add this part to the audience. We were talking again before the show. I just love you. You're my only favorite HR person. And what I love about you so much is that I like people that analyze and have logical discussions and give people information. And a lot of times when you deal with HR, they're just reciting the laws. I feel like I just called the legal helpline and they just recited the laws, where you're really saying, well, this is how it's applicable and this is what to understand and these are the choices you need to make. And that's what I absolutely love. It's like a discussion about it rather than a lecture about it. That's the distinction when you come into play. And another thing I want to let the audience know, and Sadie's going to be putting this in the chat, we are so blessed to have you as an advisor at the Pasadena SBDC. Shout out if Annie's there. And you have some upcoming webinars you're doing, etc. So tell us a little bit about the upcoming webinar. I want our audience to know about that, and Sadie will put the information in the chat.
Yeah, so I'm doing a webinar next week on the new regulation that's going into effect July 1st on the workplace violence prevention plan. So most employers, including small businesses, now will be required to have a workplace violence prevention plan into effect, as well as have trained their employees. So I'm taking a deep dive into that and what it means for small businesses. So that's next Thursday at 10 a.m. And I'm hosting, this one is actually, I'm hosting this webinar out of my own, doing a mid-year update towards the end of the month, just diving into all the laws that are going into effect for July 1st, and also doing a brief recap for the ones that went into effect July 1st. So that would be June 28th at 11 a.m. If Sadie can share the links for those, that would be greatly appreciated. But yeah, I mean, there's always something going on in the world of HR.
I know, I swear, and I could be wrong, but I swear they used to just, release it at the beginning of the year. Now I'm like, okay, now they're releasing a new law. Now it's like all throughout the year, you're getting new laws as well. It's so hard to keep up with.
Yeah.
So where I'd like to start, and I'm going to do a shout out to the audience. We're going to play a little game today. So what I'm going to say is in the Q&A, because the chat's got so much going I don't see, in the Q&A, if you're near your computer, put in there, have employees, no employees. I would like to know in our audience, how many of you have an employee, or you can say thinking of hiring. It gives us a feel for kind of where you're at. So put no employees, thinking of hiring, have an employee, put that in the Q&A. I'm going to be keeping an eye on it and just kind of see where you guys are at. So Xiomara, you know where I feel like we got to start again? We have to start at AB5. And I know we always talk about AB5, but I'm finding that I'm talking with clients on a regular basis and they're saying, well, I'm going to hire independent contractors. And I go, well, you may not be able to because of AB5. And they say, what is AB5? And I totally get why they don't know, because I don't see a lot of, if you're not looking for it, I don't see it broadcast in a bunch of places. And so if you're a brand new entrepreneur, you have no clue what AB5 is. So I'm going to give you the stage to kind of talk about AB5, just give people a feel for what it is. And then let's tie in the new regulation for the city of Los Angeles regarding the freelancer contract, because these go together. And and that way, whether somebody has an employee or not, this is for everybody that's watching today. So I'm going to give you the floor. Start with what is AB5 and let's take it from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like to say, a lot of people think, well, I don't have employees, but then, when you are looking into their operations, turns out they have like 6 independent contractors that they manage, right? They control the work and things like that. So AB5 is a law that went into effect back January 1st of 2020, but it really got overshadowed by COVID-19. So it kind of lost traction in terms of people being informed about it, right? It got overshadowed by COVID-19. But what it really did is it made it nearly impossible for anyone to hire a true independent contractor, right? So we were used to the original law from back in the 80s, 1989, I believe it's when it went into effect, the Borrello test that basically was used to determine whether someone was an independent contractor or not. And they really focused more on the exertion of control over the worker. So were you telling them what time they should show up for work? Were they using your equipment, or were they using their own equipment? Do you tell them what to do? Things like that. Do you evaluate their work? But AB5 created a new test to be able to determine if someone is a true independent contractor. So we still have that exertion of control component with prong A, right? So ABC. So, whether the worker is free from control of the in direction of the hiring entity in connection with the work that's being performed. That's prong A. Prong B looks at, if that person is performing work that is outside the line of business that the hiring entity is performing. So if you are a plumbing business and then you're quote unquote subcontracting or hiring an independent contractor that is also a plumber, then that person is not truly an independent contractor. Right. And then prong C is the worker is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature as the work that they are performing. So when someone meets all that criteria, which it's really nearly impossible to do, then they could potentially be classified as an independent contractor. And I say potentially because the Borrello test still applies when they are exempt from the ABC test. Then we now have to look at the Borrello test, the exertion of control, and go line by line and say, okay, am I controlling their hours? Am I telling them what to do? Am I giving them direction? Am I having a say in the way how they perform the work? So that's essentially AB5 in a nutshell, and what the ABC test has did or has done. That's
Let's
now
walk through
very
a piece of
difficult.
that. Yeah, that's beautiful. So let's go through some details. I want to pick that apart just a little bit. So to me, part B is the killer. Part
Mhm.
B is, are they engaged in the usual course of business? And so what I remember is when they first put this up on the website, I don't know if they still have it in this way. They had two examples. One was if somebody was at their house creating recipes and you were baking cakes, they had to be an employee because the recipe is part of the usual course of business, which
Correct.
I didn't even want to think that was a connection. And they were like, okay, if you are doing this and you have a computer repair person, then you can hire an independent contractor. So it became really clear that if they're touching anything, which is basically the same reason you'd want to hire somebody, because you need help with the usual course of business, right?
Yeah.
And even if you're a yoga instructor and you have somebody come in just to teach one yoga course, that's still the usual course of business. You got to put them as a temporary employee. So it pretty much eliminated anything you would commonly be hiring an independent contractor for to begin with. So I want to make that statement. Is there anything wrong about what I just said? Am I correct on
No.
that?
You're dead. Like you say, you know enough to be dangerous, Lori. So you're
I
right. You're
do.
right on track. Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. And that's the most difficult prong to meet, to find someone that's outside of the scope of the line of business. Because most of the time, people think, okay, well, I have, a lot of business coming. I'm going to hire someone to help me, but it's
Right.
usually, to help them within the same line of business.
Yep. And see, that's, guys, why I was doing that little model at the beginning, because, this model has always been important to me. Can I afford to hire somebody that doesn't make smart? But I think AB5 has created such a dilemma because even an independent contractor now comes under the hiring. So now I'm going to go into part C. So part C always uses the words, if you're hiring from a bona fide company, then you could have them as an independent company, right? But bona fide company has never been clearly defined. I've not heard it. And every time I try to identify bona fide company, because I know at first the trucking industry was trying to have everybody just sign up as an LLC, you're good. No, that's not good. So then they said, sign up as an LLC and do a little marketing, you're good. No, that's not good. So it becomes almost challenging to what is even a bona fide company, making it okay to even hire somebody that is a company. And so
Yeah.
let's talk about that C, so people get it out of their head, just feeling comfortable on this bona fide concept. Okay, let's go down that road now.
Yeah. So essentially, if you subcontract someone to help you and they are actually an established business, so now you're subcontracting an established business. First of all, the first step I would advise anyone to do is make sure that person has workers' comp insurance and it's set up, and that their employees are set up as part of their payroll, right? Because that then mitigates liability for you, because if that's not the case, then you subcontracting them, you're basically subcontracting a new set of employees under you. Should someone be injured, God forbid, guess who would be the responsible party, right?
Exactly.
So bona fide, so they, as much clarification as they provided, right? So what it means is you can subcontract someone that is an established business, so as long as their employees are not providing direct services to the hiring entity's customers, right? So that was one of the clarifications that were provided there. And obviously they want a written contract. You want to have all those things in place as well. But it does get a little bit tricky because as I've mentioned in the past, this client we had at the SBDC that had reached out for assistance because she was audited by EDD. And her line of business was in the garment industry. They design, dresses and things like that. And also they would upsell or sell some makeup. And they had hired these models to basically showcase the makeup that they would use. And these models were set as a separate business. They had their own clients. They had their own website. You would have thought, we had this scenario, right? Where they were subcontracting someone that was quote unquote bona fide. But EDD said, no, they went back to prong B. They went back to prong B and said, this is within the same line of business as your business. And therefore, they are considered your employees. Although this client was able to show, these models are set up as their own entity. They have their own business cards. They do advertising. They have this many other customers. I don't control, I don't tell them when they should, model my makeup or anything like that. They completely work on their own. And EDD determined, no, they went back to prong B.
I was going to ask you to tell that story because that one blew me away. However, 30 years in business, having my own company, doing turnaround and having to go into audits with different companies, I have learned a lot of times, many of the times, you can't just apply practical, logical common sense because you don't know where they're going to vote on, how the precedents are. I've had that happen before, but that one is shocking. And what it does is it tells everybody in the audience, I'm so glad you mentioned is that you just don't know, and this law has not been on the books long enough to see where the precedents and where is the defining moment. So I feel like we can't quite end without saying, well, what happens? I'm not saying that the AB5 police are running in the streets every day, but what happens if they do decide that you have misclassified an independent contractor and they should have been an employee? Let's say, what is some of the worst things that can happen to you if this does happen and you get caught?
Yeah, so, first and foremost, so different entities audit different things, right? So for example, in that example with EDD, they were auditing for payroll tax for the state, right? So in that scenario, then you owe whatever, going back up to 3 years, whatever payroll tax you should have paid them plus 50% penalty on that. And I think that client that I was mentioning, they actually had hired or had been operating that way for 2 years with the models. And after negotiating back and forth with EDD, I think they paid just under 20K for payroll tax and including penalties. So that's something EDD can audit for. Then you have, you can get penalties from the labor commissioner for not having workers' compensation insurance for those employees. And that can be up to $10,000 per violation, not to exceed $100,000 in penalties. Then you go, the IRS, you owe taxes to the IRS as well. Same thing, 15 plus whatever you owe plus 15%. And just the fact of misclassifying a worker as an independent contractor when they should have really truly been an employee, that's a penalty that can range from 5K up to 25K per violation. So, do the math. what outweighs those penalties, right? And make an informed decision. If that is the route you're going to go, just know what you're getting yourself into to make an informed decision. The other thing I was going to mention was, and I'm blanking out right now, but truly essentially misclassifying a worker is a violation of every employment law, right? Because every employment law, especially here in California, provides protections, provides rights to the employees. So for example, like if an independent contractor needed, time off to go take care of their like a qualifying family member under the California Family Medical Leave law, then you have just violated that as well. If they should have, you know, they should have taken paid sick leave, then, and you didn't provide it because they were misclassified as an independent contractor, then you have violated that law as well. So essentially, it is truly a violation of most of the regulations here in California, which brings me to a good segue to the City of Los Angeles ordinance, because a lot of independent contractors are not protected by the labor laws. They don't have the same rights as employees would. A lot of action has been going into place to provide protections for independent contractors. One being the City of Los Angeles passing an ordinance last year that requires, mainly they want to make sure that independent contractors are compensated and are not being taken advantage of. So the ordinance essentially requires a written agreement or a written contract between the independent contractor, the freelancer is the word that they're using, the freelancer and the hiring entity, that must list the rate of pay. It must list the contact information, email address. It must list, when they are expected to be compensated, which if it's not listed, it should be assumed that it is within 30 days of the services being performed. And this is applicable to any work that is performed within boundaries of the City of Los Angeles. Now, we know that's fairly large, because when we think City of Los Angeles, we're thinking like downtown area, but City of Los Angeles really actually expands to other what we would consider neighborhoods, right? Like, for example, Sherman Oaks, Van Nuys, Hollywood, all those are within boundaries of the City of Los Angeles. And I can actually provide more information, like as far as, if someone has questions, whether they fall under City of Los Angeles or not. There is a website that does provide you that information, but essentially that's what we're looking at for the ordinance, is that they just want to make sure people are being compensated appropriately for the work that they are performing.
And that's very interesting as well. And you're right, City of Los Angeles, because I always have to check to see if you need a business license through the City of Los Angeles. I have to use the map, because the Office of Finance, and what I have found over the years of consulting, the City of Los Angeles is a lot more aggressive on checking and going after things than other areas, like business license. They will see if you have a tax return showing you're in business, and if that address comes within their jurisdiction, they are sending out notices. So they are much more active. And back on the notices, I want to come back to something you said earlier about how they were being audited for payroll taxes. What we were kind of chatting about it, and I'm not trying to say anything by this other than what happens a lot is a agency is auditing based on something else. Like maybe you messed up and didn't fill out the 1065 and send it to the company, to the IRS, I mean, because you are, have a independent contractor. Maybe you didn't get your payroll taxes correct. Maybe you did this. They audit something else, and then that's how they find these situations. It's true that the person can go complain to them, but I find more what happens is the paperwork trail is not filled out properly. That's why, like, when I fill out any of my, even my IRS documents, I'm like making sure I double check, because I just don't want to fill out anything wrong, because that opens up a ton of questions, so that's why I just want to say to guys, be really careful. And you're going to bring up something on the payroll in a second, but be really careful when you're dealing with these forms, because it's too often small companies who don't like these things, and I don't like them either. I get it, right? But you just try to fill out the form real quick. You're doing it on your phone. You got to remember that you're sending this stuff off to government organizations that are all linked by computers. And I'm not trying to be a scare person, but you have to be really careful on these forms to make sure, so you don't begin these conversations. So chat a little bit on that and additional things that you shared with me that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah. So, essentially it's really important to, as Lori mentioned, have all your documentation filled out correctly, like especially when you're setting up your payroll account with EDD. right? You got on a quarterly basis, you have to be remitting payroll taxes. And if you're using a third party that's processing payroll for you and that's taking care of all that for you in the back end, you got to make sure that they are also doing it correctly. One mistake I see a lot of companies make, and you and I were chatting before we started the webinar, is that a lot of times, because you have a payroll company, a lot of businesses think like, okay, well, everything's kind of running on autopilot, and I got employees on payroll. I just go ahead and click, whatever I need to click to submit the payroll for the pay period. But what you're not realizing is that when you have employees, for example, that terminate employment and you don't terminate them in the system, they continue to show up as active employees. And what that does is it's, a series of things. So when you leave, say, for example, I'm your employee, I terminated, but you keep me in the system. If you're providing health insurance for me or any other benefits, those benefits may continue because you haven't notified, you haven't triggered the process when you terminate someone in the system. And you're also probably paying workers' comp insurance premiums. If or you run the chance of like this person being picked up by the payroll, your payroll processing, and then being paid an additional paycheck. I actually saw this happen once, and they forgot to terminate this employee, and they had their payroll kind of like on autopilot, where you just click of a button. A lot of these apps are like very like easy to use. Like it'll just remember, the algorithm. Like you just click of a button, and they automatically populate the hours or import the hours. And then this person got hours added somehow, and they got basically an extra paycheck.
Yeah.
Things
I'm
like
not
that.
surprised. I'm not surprised. And I gotta say, I'm about to say something, and this is Lori's opinion only. Okay. So that's my little fine print. This is Lori's opinion only. I am, for my private clients, especially when I go in for turnaround, I make sure the payroll's with an ADP. I'll be okay with net pay, but I will not use the other payroll companies. And that is because I'm not saying ADP is great, never makes mistakes. Okay. I don't get paid by ADP, but they have representatives in each state and they understand the state laws. And
Mhm.
I don't like, people are like, well, I'm going to find this cheap payroll company and I'm going to use this app. Once again, they don't realize that this is being tied into government documents and everything. And I saw during the pandemic, which I saw more tax returns than any human being should ever see during a time period of their life, right? Because I was helping applying for the COVID loans. And I would see these companies, they were setting up the payroll wrong, and because they couldn't get the PPP. And I was amazed how much. And I said, well, how did you get them to say? Well, they said it was fine if I take this and on one was, it's fine if I take this salary person and just do an hourly and divide it by. I'm like, no, that's not fine, right? But the times that I have worked with ADP with my clients, which is quite a lot, at least they caught things. I actually would go into a turnaround and I go into the ADP and they go, yeah, they shouldn't have done this, they shouldn't have done that, or they get messages. So all I'm trying to say is not name drop and say use this company, but I am trying to say be very conscious, save money on other areas of your business. Don't save money on payroll companies, accounting, and any of these other things. Your thoughts on that? Am I being just a little too stickler, or what's your thoughts?
No, I agree with you. I think, and I think really when it comes, like, sometimes we don't know what we don't know, right? And if we're hiring our first couple employees and then now we're trying to outsource it, we don't know what to expect. We don't know what we're required to do, and we're really relying on the payroll company to kind of guide us. But what you have to understand is a lot of companies, they're maybe they're not being as detailed as you should be, right? So, it doesn't mean that because you outsource it to someone else that you don't look at your quarterly taxes, what's being paid, and those have to be paid on time, because otherwise, if they're not being paid on time, you're paying penalties. for that. So there's particular deadlines that they need to be submitted by. So when you're looking for a payroll company, you know, my suggestion would be you want to, number one, make sure that you understand what it is exactly that they're going to do for you. Are they going to be the ones filing your payroll taxes? Are they going to be the ones responding to EDD claims, like for example, like unemployment insurance claims from your employees or disability insurance claims for your employees, things like that, you know, and they have to also report, there's a couple of reports, they have to also report wages for your employees. That's how EDD is able to know how much a person has earned and how much benefit they are entitled to when they do apply for like disability or unemployment insurance, things like that. So really having a good understanding of what it is the payroll company is going to do. And then number two, I would suggest, you know, EDD does have some webinars where they walk business owners on how to set up payroll, all the wage and hour regulations that are applicable. They do cover some independent contractor regulations as well. So I would encourage, if you are someone that's going to be setting up like you know, your payroll, or you're going to be onboarding employees, I would encourage you to take those seminars. Actually, they're seminars because they're good 4 hours, I think. Because they go through everything, Lori. They go through like independent contractor to like, you know, how to pay overtime, how to pay double time, reporting time. You know, they basically cover everything that's on the wage orders, and then different industries as well. So I would, if you're going to be someone that's going to be subcontracting or outsourcing your payroll, or you know, thinking about processing payroll on your own, I would highly encourage you to take that seminar from EDD.
I fully agree. And you can go on their website. They have all that information. You know, going back on one quick thing that I saw happen, and this goes, and I'm tying in accounting and bookkeeping processes that are not being done internally in small companies as well. And you said it, so I'm going to come back to it. This is where I'm going with this. Like you said, you need to look at how much is submitted to the government, those forms at the end of the year, in relationship to what you do an audit, you do a check. So when you have a company that has somebody in that's doing like an accounting, and what happens is then at the end of the year, you look at how much the report says was submitted in payroll taxes, and you compare it with your internal records, and you make sure everything lines up. That's what companies typically had done in the past. But now that we're getting bookkeepers that really are just kind of technology people that know how to use QuickBooks Online, they don't know to go back and double check these numbers. And it's so important. And Xiomara, I had one of the scariest things from an SBDC client already occurred when it came to me. They were asking me questions. They had, I don't know whether they set up QuickBooks Online. I don't know where the mistake went, but they had like 15 employees, and they were collecting taxes properly on all 15, but only submitting on 13. This got, yes, okay, this got undetected, this little bit, nobody caught it. So it went down the road until, of course, they match it up, right? So what happens, and people don't realize that if you make that mistake, it comes under civil liability. It's a fraud. It's civil. It goes outside the corporation. And anybody who touches even the envelope is liable. So his daughter and his other daughter, who all touched envelopes, who were involved in payroll, all have liens on their houses.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, terrible. They had to shut down the guy. It was a nightmare. And it was because nobody was checking these numbers. So I can't say enough how important it is. And that's why I feel like so many things that can happen and go wrong. You want to pay the extra money for the expertise. Now, I noticed in our chat, we got a mixture of employees and non-employees. So I want to get into some things about the new employee laws. But before we do, I got to take one other aspect about this. And this is something you shared with me that I didn't know. And I'm going to repeat it. And you're going to tell me the right things, because I don't have it completely right, I think. That if I was to hire an independent contractor, and it even wasn't bona fide independent contractor, it was correct, I got to report that. I think EDD that I hired within a certain amount of days. I can't just hire Joe to come in and fix my computer to a certain degree, or there's some rule. So tell me in our audience what that rule is, and then let's get into new hiring stuff, because that's also important for people to know.
Yeah, so if you're going to hire, whether you hire an employee or you hire an independent contractor, and you're going to pay that independent contractor more than $600 in the year, you do have to report them with EDD. And that is because EDD reports them to a national registry to find out, find any parents or any individuals that may owe child support. So within 20 days of you hiring someone, you do have to report them to EDD. And there's a report that you have to submit to them. You can do it online, or you can download the form and mail it to them. But that does need to be completed. And that is something also that you should check with the payroll companies to see if they're going to be doing that for you. Some of them do, some of them don't. So, you just need to double check these things. Again, if this is like the first time, people are looking for payroll companies, they don't know about asking about all these things, So I'm always a resource. If you want to, run anything by me, you can reach out. Yeah, I just hate to see people be vulnerable and end up in not so good circumstances.
I agree. And see, I always knew you had to do that with the employee because they look for back child support. I had never heard about independent contractors. You have to do it. That's a unique thing. And once again, going back to my paperwork, that goes into EDT, it goes into a federal. And now you've got that you hired an independent contractor with more than 600, which can also be picked up by IRS when they don't report income. That's why you got to look at these things for as far as paper trails go. Okay. Phew. Now, tell us I know you got these other webinars that are going to go into detail with that, right? But for those who have employees, and we got more that have employees or thinking about having employees than I actually thought in our audience we have. So thank you guys for letting us know that. Go through some of the new laws that if you have employees or thinking of hiring employees that you may need to be aware of.
Yeah, so brief update of what's in effect and what's to come into effect for July 1st. So we have minimum wage increasing in some of the local cities, Pasadena to $17.50, Santa Monica, Malibu, and unincorporated LA County, it's going up to $17.27. And then City of Los Angeles, of course, had to one up them to $17.28. So that's the update we have on that. And then anyone in the healthcare industry may also be affected by minimum wage going up in the healthcare industry. They are trying to increase the minimum wage to $25 an hour, and they are phasing it in. Mostly this applies to large hospitals that have 10,000 or more employees, and or healthcare systems. But if you also are a clinic, if you also do some if you maybe own residential care facilities, or if you even subcontract with a hospital to provide janitorial services, this may be applicable to you. So yeah, so that's another caveat, or another another thing that's going on, that if even if your line of business is not within the healthcare industry, but you support and you actually subcontract with a healthcare facility, and they have the ability to, going back to kind of similar to the ABC test, and they have the ability to have control over their working conditions, over their wages, and the way that the work is being performed, then the minimum wage for healthcare may be applicable to you, and that is going to be $21 an hour as of July 1st, and then I think for the smaller facilities, they're giving up to 2 years to phase it in, but the goal is to increase it to $25 an hour. And then
wow, that's huge. I mean, I gotta just say, I when you were saying healthcare, I'm like, okay, and then you could be a janitor just cleaning in healthcare. I just wanted to make sure people caught that. Keep going, please.
Yeah, I do have a client that is going to be affected by this because he subcontracts with the larger hospitals to do janitorial services. So it's a big deal. It's a big hit for them. And then what else is going on? The workplace violence prevention plan that goes into effect July 1. You must have the plan implemented and have your employees trained by July 1st. So if you hadn't heard about that, I highly encourage you to look into it and get it done within the next couple of weeks. And what else is going on? I think that's pretty much it as far as that's going into effect for July 1st. As a recap, some of the laws that went into effect the beginning of the year, some of the most impactful, paid sick leave went up from 3 days to 5 days. For those of you that hadn't heard about that, we also had the new hire or the new employment brochures. Like when you hire employees, you're required to provide them some of the state brochures to let them know about their rights. A lot of those were updated, so make sure you're using the latest and greatest from 2023 and 2024. And we had reproductive leave that went into effect too. That's applicable to employers with at least 5 employees. If you have an employee that suffered a reproductive loss, they may take up to 5 days of leave time. And last but not least, I mean, there's a lot more, but I guess one of the most controversial was the marijuana use laws. Now it's considered a protected category, and you cannot discriminate against an employee or an applicant for their marijuana use outside of the scope of work or outside of work hours. And so, yeah, that's
Wow.
that's our
Okay. Okay, guys, are you overwhelmed? Because I'm overwhelmed. Okay, let's go back and let's pick up a few questions and a few things. Thank you so much. You are such a gem to the show. I just want to say a heartfelt thank you for always coming back on for me. So one of the questions Tamara has, is there a difference between hiring an independent contractor and hiring a vendor? I'm taking a guess on this, that when she's saying hiring a vendor, she's saying like buying from a manufacturer where you're purchasing their finished goods or something. That's my think on what she means. You may have a different think on it. I read it just like she wrote it. Tamara can give us some more info on it. But what's your statement on that question? Is it a difference between hiring an independent contractor and hiring a vendor?
Yeah, I mean, we have to look at like prong C, right? So are they an established, I would look at that. Are they an established business in the same line of business that they are operating, and do they have other clients? Because a lot of times, people are, and you may consider a vendor someone that's like now like selling on Amazon, but they're truly just, that's just their gig, right? So I would look at, if they're an established company, they've been around for years, they have other clients, as far as how they do it. But then again, if they're performing work for you, look at the ABC test. That's the main thing. Look at the ABC test.
Yeah, that's the key. And back a little bit, Christine asking, this is always a good question to ask on any topic. I like bringing up how people try to define virtual being different. So her question is, what about people who have set themselves up as sole props in a virtual assistant business? So virtual, just because you're virtual doesn't change things all the time, does it? So talk about that, because that's, I think, a gray area that I don't get how they define that all the time as well.
In regard to the independent contractors?
85, yeah.
Yeah. So all I want to say is just there's no workaround.
I know.
So there's no workaround. And even if someone is out of state, but they are supporting a business that's based in California, you're still governed by the ABC test. You're still required to report them to EDD. You're still required to do all those things. So yeah, there's just really no workaround. The other thing you want to look for when you're hiring someone remote is that you want to make sure that they are not within, any of the local municipalities that have their own ordinances. So for example, City of Los Angeles, right? If you're hiring someone that's remote, but they're within boundaries of the City of Los Angeles, then, you've got to follow their ordinance with the contract and all those things. Or even if you're hiring someone remotely and they're within boundaries of the local cities that have their own ordinance for minimum wage, you have to pay them that applicable minimum wage.
I had a client and they did interpretation for a lot of times courts. They would have it in a different language and they would have to do interpretation. And they had a client that they had, which had a company in some other state, I can't remember, but they were one of many, and it was a good client for them. And they were that was one of their predominant clients, right? So what ended up happening when AB5 went into effect? Remember, this client's not in California. They cut off all the court interpreters that they were hiring in California because they didn't want to touch it. So they lost their major client, and they were saying, you know what, I can get a court interpreter in other states. I don't want to take the chance. And they lost their major client. And I felt really bad for them because it really had nothing to do with, their ability to perform. It was, but at the same time, I understood what the company was saying. They were like, I don't want to take a chance on this, and I can hire in any state, and I have them in other states. So it's a sad state of affairs on that. Here's another question. Anonymous asks, if somebody designs and maintains your website, are they considered independent contractor or marketing services? But I think that goes back to the usual course of business. If you're not in the business of designing and creating websites and marketing, then that's somebody is like coming in and helping you fix the computer. It's B, are they in the usual course of business? Obviously, are you controlling and using the tools?
Right.
But most of the time, not in that case. So we got to remember, it comes back to the usual course of business. Otherwise, you're just hiring somebody in to perform a task that helps the company to function, like fixing your computer, doing your web design, etc. It's the usual course of business, which is 99.9% of why you want to hire somebody in the first place, right?
Right. Yeah, you're 100% correct on that. Yeah. Absolutely.
I think it's so true what you said. There's really very little workarounds. And I think it just becomes, this is what I think, and this is Lori being Lori, guys. You know how I am, right? I think it is what it is. This is how I look at life. It is what it is, right? And so if you're going to have a company in California, what it just means is you've got to be strategic in your decisions. You might say, you know what? I'm not going to hire someone. Instead, I'm going to do the work myself. I'm going to limit the amount I can sell. I'm going to do more customized work, charge a higher price. So I may be not selling as many units, but I'm doing it under my umbrella because I know the ability to grow is going to be so cost prohibited that I would be better off working this amount of time. And do that, Xiomara, and I tell people all the time, having looked at too many numbers. I look at too many tax returns and too many numbers for any human being, right? But coming out of the pandemic and even during the pandemic, do you know what companies I find make the most money nowadays? It's the solopreneur, the person who's selling their own skill, whether they're a massage therapist, a consultant, they're doing web design, whatever, but it's the person who's a solopreneur selling their own services, their own skill. They are the ones that are making the most money now. No surprise on that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. An alternative could be, if you really do need to hire someone, but you're not quite sure, you could like hire someone through a staffing agency, right? The staffing agency is the one that takes on the majority of the responsibility of being the employer and complying with a lot of the regulations. Some things may still be applicable, to the hiring entity, but the bulk of it, like the workers' compensation, the payroll tax, all that stuff is going to fall under the staffing agency.
And I'm glad you brought that up because that's such a good point. We used to in the olden days think we don't want to hire through a staffing agency because it's so expensive, but the tables have turned. It may be actually less or equitable in cost. So that is a good consideration. I'm going to go a couple minutes over just to get a couple more questions. And I have to ask this. I have to ask this out loud because I'm curious. This is what Brenda wrote. Can someone smoke marijuana on their break and then return to work without risk of impairment? I got to ask that. I don't know. I love that question, Brenda. I know Xiomara's like, Lori, I can't believe it.
So the law basically is applicable. They can do it so as long as it's not in the premises and it's not during work hours. So the break, although the break I don't know if they meant maybe their lunch break where they're clocking out, whatever, but the rest breaks are paid by the company. Nonetheless, if they're impaired, so it doesn't give them a license to be impaired, to work under the influence. It functions just like alcohol, right? Think about it just like alcohol. You wouldn't, allow someone to go, have some drinks and then come back impaired to where they're just not able to perform their job. So, so again, they can do it during their non-work time, weekends, their leisure time, or whatever it may be. They may not show up impaired to work, and also has to be off the premises.
Makes sense. And Brenda, I get it. She's saying, I'm not asking for myself. I work within pediatrics, and these important questions, we got to ask, we got to have these discussions because we can't, and okay, I'm going to go a little bit over because the new one, I don't think this is true. Audrey asked, I was told that I need to offer a retirement plan for my one part-time employee due to a recent change in California law. Please tell me that's not true. Please tell me.
Lori. So CalSavers is the state's retirement plan that was phased in since COVID. I mean, it's been phased in to like large employers, smaller employers, got all the way down to those with 5 employees. But last year we saw a law that actually is going to make it effective for employers with at least 1 employee. The business doesn't have to contribute anything. Basically, all they're doing is making the employee aware that they have the ability to contribute to like an RIA. But yeah, they have to register with CalSavers. Essentially, that's all you need to do. You need to register with CalSavers, or if you're going to provide a retirement plan of your own through another company, then you still register and let them know you already have a plan in place. But all you need to do is register, and then if the employee decides to contribute, you'll be deducting that from their payroll, from their paycheck, and remitting it to CalSavers. So
I knew that. Okay, gotcha. I knew that. So it's not I have to set it up. But what they also have to know is an employee, then your pension or not pension, I'm sorry, your retirement is being managed through CalSavers as well. So that's who's actually managing it.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay. One quick thing that doesn't involve you, but I'm going to do a shout out to someone who asked. I don't catch your name here because I'm too far into the questions, but there is no discussion on forgiveness on the EIDL for the interest for the loan. I know people have been talking about that. Maybe, you know what, guys, next week I'm going to do, in my words of wisdom, I'm going to do an update on the EIDL loan because there's a lot of things out there that are floating around that are not true. No forgiveness. And I promise next week on my wisdom, I'll go over some of the other ones. Oh my God, Xiomara. Thank you so much. You're going to come on in
Very
3 months.
welcome.
Overwhelm me. We're going to talk about AB5
Sorry.
again. We're going to go through all this, but like I said, to me, it is what it is. And reality is about having the discussion and about looking at it and saying, what are the choices that I have? I am big into, and anybody who's on the show listening to me all the time, take your power back. And power is about choice. Nobody's saying you have to have a company and have an employee to make good money. That's not true. So it's about looking at what are your choices, but then following the law to the paper trail so you don't end up with a nightmare. That's really what it's about. So I do want to say, any last words other than my last words are, get on Xiomara's webinar, contact her. We're very lucky to have her at the Pasadena SBDC Blast. And so reach out to her. Sadie's putting her information. You're probably going to get bombarded again, Xiomara. I know you are. But
Bring
last
it on,
words
bring
for the
it on. Yeah, and I'm looking to doing more webinars, and just picking apart, all these topics. Like I think they deserve like their they deserve like their own, webinar, because there's just so much to it. So I appreciate you always having me on and just keeping people updated. But yeah, feel free to reach out with any questions. I'd be happy to help, and just happy to come on as well.
That's perfect, because I would in the past, I'd answer a few HR, law question because I stayed up on it. Now I'm like, "Don't touch that one. Nope, nope, go to her. I am not touching that. I am not going near to it. It's just too crazy and it changes too much." So thank you so much. So Sadie, I'm gonna get you back into the mix to close us out. And I want to say to the audience, Sadie's gonna stay on for just a bit to make sure you can get the contact information. You can write anything into the chat if you need a heads up to get in touch with me or however. So Sadie's going to come back, I'm sorry, Sadie's going to stay on a little bit to make sure all your last bits of words get discussed. So Sadie, that was pretty intense, wouldn't you say?
I mean, it's like, wow, information overload. And that's why I'm so appreciative of experts, right? Like, what do we say? It's like we know enough to, like, wade our way through the pool, but there are experts for a reason.
Yeah. And on the concept of experts, I'm going to end with this, Xiomara. This has been my latest new thing I've been saying all the time, and you're going to laugh. Okay. I can tell you already. Please, guys, don't get your legal, tax, finance, and HR from a TikTok video
Oh, yes. Or Google.
or
I hear
Google.
from clients, oh, I found this policy or this handbook template on Google. And I'm like,
I know. I always go straight to the horse's mouth, go to the government's website, because if anything goes bad, the horse will trample you. So make sure you go to their mouth to find out the
yeah,
copy and
yeah,
then get an expert to decipher it. That's kind of how it is, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, again, if people want to reach out, I'll be more than happy to. Going back to what you were saying, you know, I'm a solopreneur for a reason. So a lot of times, you won't I'm a one-man show, so you won't see me like do a lot of advertising for things. And I do a lot of referrals through word of mouth and things like that. So people sometimes think like, oh, well, her social media is not up to speed. She must not be legit and all that stuff. Just know that's not the case. So if you want to give me a follow, I am ramping up on my social media and stuff. But like I said, I'm going to be doing more of these webinars. So if anyone's interested in those, joining and learning more on the topics we discussed today, I'd be more than happy to answer those.
That's so funny. I'm the same way. I'm in the process of updating my website. It's so far behind because I get so much of my referrals. But I'm going to end on this. Everybody that's around me all the time knows I grew up in the small country. I was actually podunk, right? So what I see is a lot of these laws are forcing us to go back to, remember your nursery rhyme? What was it? The baker, the candlestick maker. Can anybody remember? There was three things. There was, it was the baker, the candlestick maker, and something else.
Huh. I
I can't.
can't.
Butcher, Kim. I knew somebody. I knew it. Kathy, thank you. The butcher, the baker, and the candlestick. Solopreneur, solopreneur, solopreneur. Happiness, it's a consideration, guys. Just stand back, look at your situation and go, what's going to make me happy? Okay, guys, I got to go. I
Yes.
could talk forever. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sadie. Thank you to my frequent flyers and those that are new to the show. Tune in next week when we have another great show of Small Biz Talks with your host, Lori Williams. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Bye, everyone.
everybody.